All right. Thank you so much for letting me close out. And I'm definitely honored to be here. I had the pleasure of being in a breakout room, and I thought it was really valuable. And I definitely look forward to hearing from all of the facilitators of how it went. So, I think I'll go ahead and start with Marie as we spent time together. Why don't you tell us about our room?
Um, okay, we're ready. All right. Well, there, there. I think the focus was that everybody has ideas, and the most important thing is to be able to listen and hear what other people have to say. Um, to create an environment of open communication, of being able um, to show to let's see that there's certainly true value that everybody's opinion is valued. One of the things I think that we focused on, there was one person in the group in a nonprofit, and I brought up the idea that really nonprofits like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the board is composed of uh, white males, uh, basically, people with a lot of money because they pay to be on the boards. And how can that situation be changed? And I think the point was made is that um, people have to speak up. Someone on the board has to say, look, there's diversity in this museum. We need to go outside and find people to be on the board who represent that diversity. There's always a way to begin. I love the fact that there were several things. An author, Tom Peters, was mentioned, and his book, I believe it's In Search of Excellence. If Rajan would put that in the chat, I would appreciate that so that everybody knows of it. Um, and the conclusion that he came up with after being involved in marches and fighting for civil rights is that basically I don't know anything. And I think that's a really good point, is to admit that I don't have all the answers, or maybe I have no answers in the situation, but I'm willing to learn and I'm open to learn. And I'm open to create an open forum to learn. The other point is that instead of giving to somebody, is just getting out of the way and letting somebody else grow and change. And important thing, I think, key to all of this was other people should listen. Uh, that's a technique to learn to listen. I notice many people do not listen. I've become very aware of that when I state something that I need, someone will immediately take control of how they're going to solve the problem. And I have to be able to remind them I didn't ask them to solve the problem. I asked them for an idea that I can put together to solve the problem. And I think that's something that's key in communication, because it seems like everybody especially in the pandemic, knows more than anybody else, and will not sit back and say, I really don't know, I'm open to suggestions. And you take different parts and work as a team. The team part is so important and difficult to do. It's very difficult to do, because to me that's true leadership, but that's not the view that many people have of true leadership. So thank you very much. I hope I did well for our group.
Oh, you did. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, because I really don't know much.
I think that's what we concluded after 30 minutes, that we really don't know anything, and so hopefully with some more conversations, we will start to learn something. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Marie. Let's see. So now let us hear from Francis. How are you doing today, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Um, we had a group that everyone shared equally and was very willing to join in the discussion. I think we started by where we kind of reemphasized what Jonathan was talking about in his openings talk about there seemed that what he's really talking about a paradigm shift where in the past funding or access to pursuits was a sort of determined by the past, and what he's presenting that the more we listen to the call of possibility, people start to open up to, well, yeah, it's possible to get funded, it's possible to become a professor, it's possible to do everything. And so the shifting into what is possible is really gratifying. And and the opening, Jonathan's example of the Latino superhero, that's the emphasis that we were seeing that this is possible, and it suddenly it clicks, and then it clicks in a lot of other people, and then it suddenly becomes a belief of deservedness, and the parameters of what we can do widens, and as the parameters of startups widens to all different groups, it's just determined to that that it inevitably can get funded, starting with the belief. And then we moved into a discussion of like, as the beliefs broadened, we took, one of our members was talking about she's finishing college, and and we said, what are you open to now that the world is yours, and there's more possibilities, and she brought up the topic of tech and law, and then we had a pretty interesting discussion of tech and law and how it's an opening field, but it's also a field that opens up more possibilities of. And one of our group members, Bernadette, was talking about a group that were working with her at Trinity College in Dublin, and they were developing a program for it seems like for Brazilian women and access to legal counsel when it comes to divorce, which was pretty not possible in Brazil for women without wealth to have legal representation. And this new site opens up the possibility that they can get the advice and actually move towards getting a divorce legally, soundly, without leveraging their whole future in legal bills. And so I thought that was really a concrete example of how law and the internet and can open up the possibility of like freedom. And so, and then we all, and then one of the members quickly put it to to the young lady who was pursuing interest in law and tech, and then she was offering support and how to learn more about this and different access, and everyone added to that. So I think it was a great discussion that you take one thing and looking at becoming freer, having greater choices that starts to determine what's possible in people's lives and in all our lives, and it's also made more possible by, as one of our members pointed out, by the diversity of all these groups, and that has an overall effect of broadening possibility, which is freedom. So it was a pleasure being involved. I think we all shared with each other and gained from it. So I thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely access to whether it's any type of capital, whether it's financial, social, legal, all of those things play a role in our well-being. So thank you so much for that insight. All right, and next up will be Malia. Would love to hear what was discussed in your group, and look forward to hearing what insights you guys had.
Thank you. Well, I would love to share. And I want to thank my group for sharing the space with me and just sharing your stories. And we're also, I think we were very excited that Jonathan was in our room, so we got to tap in more to his knowledge as well. So I hope that when you're having such robust conversations, sometimes it's hard to summarize such rich conversations. So I will do my best. So we started off talking with one of our members who is a micro entrepreneur, and she is a creative. And so as she's building her business, she shared how overwhelming the business side of things is, right? And learning like what are the boxes to check, what should she know, seeking mentorship and really understanding like what do I need to know, right, about this investment. And it really triggered a thought that like, well, yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the space, they're expert maybe at the product or whatever sector that is, they may not have access to business. And so if you also are a person or a group that is not, is from a disadvantaged population, you don't have access to the knowledge, the network, or the funding to allow you the space to just do what you do best and hire teams, right? And so that's why wealth begets wealth. And that led to like this discussion about like, well, Jonathan was speaking about all these things, and we know as a population to invest in, well, we would hope to invest in businesses that exist, but we don't even know as a general public on how to find out how to support businesses who are trying to get funding. I think that again, everything leads back to access. And in speaking about like check boxes, right? Businesses like are asked to hire MWBE businesses as like tax write-off, and it looks good and it's diversity. And really, are we internalizing that this is being done to better everyone, right? It is not just a checkbox. And our other group members shared that, sometimes when if you're hired or you're brought in or you're given a contract with a checkbox because it's meeting the checklist of this wealthy person who's hiring you, it could lead to you being undervalued by them or other employees, like, oh, you're just here because of this checkbox, right? Which is not, the case. It's off of merit. And she shared about she grew up in Hawaii, so I related. And when her mother is a white entrepreneur, and in Hawaii, she was up against a male-dominated sect of business owners who are also locals, and so they really are just investing within the culture. And so she taught her like, you want to be a person to own your life, but you're going to have to get through this, right? That grit. And so in speaking about that, it really just triggered like, well, what does that look like when you're investing, within the community and having other, having investors that invest in, like how Jonathan mentioned, Black and Latinx and even other Asian founders. And, is it about that network? And so we were lucky to have him comment on that. Because another member also raised that, she has a biracial daughter and who's also an entrepreneur. And is it about that networking? And he really called something out. He's like, yes, that is a part of it, that we should be networking and connecting and empowering ourselves and moving forward that way. But it's about connecting back and how do we intertwine our networks with those that have power now, right? And he shared a story about how when he is working as a Latino investor in working with founders who are not white, he actually is a lot harder and tougher on them, right? He scrutinized them a little bit more because he wants to prepare them for the bias, if not malicious, there's still bias that they are going to face so that they can handle that. And he gave an example about how he went and he was a Latino investor, a founder, co-founder was Latino, they had a diverse team, all established, had startups before, and they went to an investor and they said, wow, you have such a diverse team. And it's not that they intended that's who they know, that's their network that they're presenting to investor. But the investor ended up going with another company that was parallel to them in where they were at, right? So the reason the investor gave them that you're not ready wasn't quite true, because they did fund another company that was in the same position. But the thing was that they knew the other folks. So the other folks may not have been more qualified, but again, networking. And it's that not even realizing that it's implicit bias because he didn't feel it was malicious. And I agree with that. I think a lot of times things aren't malicious. It's this implicit bias, and it's about how we intertwine all of that. And I will leave this with his final thought, is that he said, we need to rewire what success looks like. And when we think about hustle culture, like true hustle culture, like get out there, go get it, you know what I mean? We need to figure out, it's like, how do we marry that hustle culture that we typically find in minority culture, because we're trying to make it out here in the world. How do we marry that with getting people knowledge and resource, so access to that? So thank you again to my group. Thank you, Jonathan, for letting me repeat your words and passing that through. I hope I did a great job, and yep, have a good day.
Thank you so much. And again, it seems like the word that I hear again is access. So thank you so much for letting me know what went on in your group. And let's see, last but not least, we have Pilar. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I look forward to hearing what happened in your group, and what were the takeaways from your group.
Thanks, AJ. Just to kind of you said my name just fine. I'm gonna say Pilar because I have a name that's hard to say, as Jonathan mentioned earlier. So it took me a long time to ask people to say it right. So I guess I'll take the space here to do it. But I'm gonna try to be quick in the interest of time. We had a really great and robust discussion in my group. I really appreciated everybody's input, and we had a lot of great different varied experience in our group. So one of our group members is a CPA who's worked with small businesses for a long time, and she was mentioning that 95% of businesses are small businesses, so they're the engine of our economy. And so it's important to support businesses that are smaller, and all small businesses are startups at one point because they have to start from somewhere. And she was mentioning that there are programs in place to help small businesses succeed, but despite having the programs in place and the tools that exist, the needle is not being moved forward as quickly or as much as we think it would, based on having these tools in place. And then we started to talk a little bit more with another group member who is an entrepreneur herself and also a person of color. And she was mentioning that she has ingrained in herself from her family, her father, a strong sense of confidence in herself. And that's allowed her to move forward in her professional life, to have the confidence to say, I'm just as good as that employee next to me. I'm doing as good of a job. I can do it just as well. And I have the confidence in myself to believe that I am the right person for this opportunity. And so we talked a little bit about, it was wonderful that she had had a family who had helped her gain that confidence. But what about the people who don't have that? And maybe if we had more mentoring opportunities for young people, women, people of color, all young people really, who are underrepresented in our country, might not have that from their own families. Maybe if we had more programs in place to give people more confidence when they're younger, maybe they would be able to be like her, not afraid to ask for money as a female entrepreneur. There's money out there to get, but women often don't ask for what they want because they feel like they don't deserve it, right? So having that confidence in yourself to go out and actually ask for what you want. I also think all underrepresented groups of people have a confidence, sometimes have a confidence issue. You don't believe you deserve the opportunity, so you don't ask for it. And so how do you really garner that in people? And then we also talked a little bit about how did we get here? How did these inequities start? And, everything goes back to historically, like what has gone on here. What were jobs that were considered appropriate for women and people of color? You think about pink labor, the pink collar jobs. Women often came up in areas of support or in domestic work. People of color often had to work in service industries. And those are typically not the sectors of our economy that are valued by people with money that want to invest, right? But the people of color and women have plenty of money to spend. And I think that, we undervalue the economic power of these groups. And so they're underinvested and underfunded because they're not sort of seen as important as other types of industry. But there's a lot of power in women and people of color, and there's a lot of money that these people would like to spend at businesses that are maybe owned by people who are more representative of people, like we were talking about before, can't be what you can't see. You see somebody who's like you starting a business, you'll want to give them your money. And I think that the economic and power of these of underrepresented groups is really there's not as much value placed on it. And so just in closing, we did talk a little bit about how women are now starting businesses at twice the rate of men. And we talked a little bit about why that might be. And it's because women have more freedom to take on the domestic and familial responsibilities that often fall on women's shoulders more than men. It gives them the freedom to sort of have their families and their jobs. One of our entrepreneur was actually playing with her child in the park when this started, and she was still able to contribute. She made it back home in time to sit down and have a conversation with the group, and it didn't suffer a second for it. She's able to multitask, she's able to do many things, and as her own boss, as her own employer, she's able to have more flexibility in her life. So it makes a lot of sense that women want to own businesses and work for themselves. So I think I'll stop there. We said a lot more stuff, but I know we're running short on time. But I really want to thank my group. I really enjoyed the conversation that we had. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Pilar. I greatly appreciate that. There were definitely things in there that resonated with me. And I think through all of what we've discussed, I definitely heard being empowered to have the confidence. I know sometimes within my own community, we often will tell each other, have the confidence of a mediocre white man. That influences us to rise to the occasion. So that's how I've always chose to deal with it. But I think one thing that gave me the opportunity to have a greater level of confidence was my uncle was in wealth management. And so I got a chance to spend a few years in South Florida around affluence, and just I knew that they put on their pants the same way I do, one leg at a time. And so I definitely feel that I have the right to have anything that any other wealthy person has. And so it's only a matter of time before I'm in their shoes. So thank you so much for joining us here. And as I was thinking through how to close this out, I definitely think that I can take away some of the findings from the group in my story of how I got here. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I knew that I wanted to be one since I was a teenager. And that was because as a teenager, I was hanging out, spending my summers in the Charlotte Pro-Am, which is where all of the college and pro players would come and play during the summer. And so at the time, that was when Charlotte Hornets were the Hornets the first time. So Muggsy Bogues and Dale Curry was who I was spending my summers with. But at some point I realized that I'm under 6 foot. I'm skinny. So I'm probably not going to go to the NBA. But I was like, man, what do at some point I realized that they were all high paid employees. And I was like, man, what do their boss do? And they just own stuff. And I was like, I probably have a better chance of reading books to own a team than I will ever play for one. So that kind of led me down the path of being an entrepreneur. And after college, I would spend my time inside of a research lab, just kind of watching chemists work. And so I went on to help found an embalming fluid company. And so we kind of mentioned it in my group, but one of the things that we mentioned when everyone came back was access. And so I did not have access to solve a particular business problem. And well, that problem cost me a $15 million loan. And so, that was definitely a tough lesson to learn. And believe me, every morning I wake up and I have a full-time job. I really think about not having that resource and those connections to solve that problem that would have allowed me to still have that $15 million loan. So I definitely think it's important to do so, and hopefully I can put myself in a position that I can help someone else out in the future so that they can solve that problem. So I'm really excited to be working with the living, and that kind of led me here today. Jonathan as well as Nanali are teachers and mentors of mine through Founder Streams, and so they are helping me with my tech company. And I'm currently, I think 2020 like made me realize how important human connection is, and we all are you know are affected by our support network. And so existing relationships and that existing network is so important to our mental health and our well-being. And so, this year alone, 50,000 people will commit suicide in the US. And that can be prevented by just having one close friend. And so that's why I'm really focused on our existing relationships, because our current communication tools just aren't allowing us to have deep relationships. And so, one of the first conversations, that we were having was like, how am I feeling? And, instead of giving the cookie cutter response, I was like, I really have a high level of anxiety. And on top of, starting a company, managing team, trying to be investor ready, I'm also Black in America. And any day I leave the house could potentially be my last. And I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a father, I'm a family member, I'm a coworker, so there's other people in my life that I also care about that they have to leave the house too. And so I also like, when I get that phone call, is that phone call going to be, hey, how are you doing? Or is it going to be something more than that? And so, there's definitely a high level of anxiety, but I'm smiling through those tears for a few reasons. One, I'm working on something that's bigger than myself. I'm also having more conversations like these outside of my community. I find that young people are demanding more of us, their employers, and society. Um, Also, power is much more decentralized. So you can't just simply burn down Black Wall Street. And so Black and brown tech founders have the power to create wealth in a variety of places. And and you can't just go burn it down. So I think for all of us, I want to uh, just let you know that I'm smiling through the tears. And I think you can make a difference in someone's life by just being a better support network to them. And going back to what was mentioned is increasing access. And that can be access of a variety of ways, whether it's capital, whether it's social, do something to pay that forward. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I definitely look forward to coming back and enjoying these conversations again in the future.
Thank you.
Andre, thank you so much.